The galaxy was bright that night. Millions of stars shone like silent eyes, watching over the great fleets of the Celestial Empire. Across every world, people spoke of progress, honor, and power. Yet among all the shining worlds, one name was almost forgotten: Earth. Once long ago, humans had touched the stars. They had built ships, colonies, and wonders. But time had passed, wars had come, and Earth had faded into myth. The other species said the humans were gone, weak, lost, or extinct. Only stories remained, told around fires on far planets. But one day in the Grand Starlight Academy, a new name appeared on the student list. Elias Kane, species, human, origin, Earth. When the news spread, laughter filled the corridors. Many cadets thought it was a mistake. Some believed it was a joke. But when the small transport ship landed, they saw him, a tall young man with calm gray eyes and brown hair that caught the light. His uniform was plain, his face quiet, but there was something about him that made people look twice. He walked alone through the shining halls of the academy. Around him, students of every race whispered and stared. They had claws, wings, scales, glowing eyes, and power in their blood. They could control energy, bend metal, or talk to machines. Elias had none of that. A voice behind him laughed. So it's true. A human, he turned. Standing there was Lyra Valen, daughter of the great Admiral Valen of the Celestial Fleet. She was known across the academy. Golden hair, silver eyes, and the proud grace of her people, the Erythians. She looked at him like one might look at a strange animal. "Tell me, human," she said with a smile that was not kind. "Do you still believe the old tales? That your kind once ruled the stars?" Elias met her gaze calmly. "I believe what is written in history," he said softly. Lyra laughed again. "History? Or fantasy? The stars have forgotten you," he didn't answer. He only walked past her, his boots quiet on the silver floor. That night, Elias stood alone in the observation dome. Above him stretched the endless sky, full of glowing lines of ships and worlds. The stars shimmered like waves. He touched the glass gently and whispered, "They have forgotten us. But maybe we have not forgotten them." He had come here not to prove anything, but to learn, to see how far humanity had truly fallen. His people on the hidden colony of Earth still remembered. They told stories of the first explorers, of ships that sang through the void. And now, Elias was here to see if those stories were only dreams. The next morning, the academy bells rang, calling cadets to training. The hall was huge, filled with lights, weapons, and floating drones. Instructors shouted commands while students tested their energy fields. Elias watched carefully. Every cadet could call energy from the air, glowing streams of power that followed their movements. The energy bent metal, lifted stones, and formed shields. When his turn came, the instructor frowned. "You don't have an energy signature, human?" Elias shook his head. "No, sir. Humans lost that ability long ago. Then how do you plan to survive here?" "By learning," Elias said quietly. Lyra smirked from across the room. "Learning won't help when power decides everything." The instructor ignored her and handed Elias a small practice rod. "Then show us your skill in hand combat." Elias stepped forward. The rod felt light in his hand. His eyes focused. The spar began. His opponent, a tall blue-skinned cadet named Varen, charged with energy whirling around his arms. Elias moved faster than expected. He ducked, twisted, and struck the side of Varen's arm. The rod hummed and Varen stumbled. He attacked again, energy crackling like lightning. Elias rolled aside, his movements clean and precise. Every motion was controlled, measured. The style of someone who had practiced not for glory but survival. In seconds, Varen was disarmed. The hall fell silent. The instructor raised his eyebrows. "Not bad, human." Elias nodded once and stepped back. He didn't smile. Lyra, watching from the edge, felt a strange flicker of curiosity. She wouldn't admit it, but his calm face had something she couldn't understand. Later, during lunch, Elias sat alone. The food machines offered strange dishes from many worlds. He chose something simple, bread and water. Around him, laughter echoed again. A group of cadets walked past. One whispered, "Look, the human eats like a cave dweller." Another added, "Maybe he misses his dirt planet." Elias said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was stronger than anger. But that night he trained alone in the simulator hall. He practiced against moving drones, dodging, striking, and adapting. Every hit left a mark on his arms, but he continued. The machines recorded his rhythm. Fast, accurate, efficient. When he paused for breath, he looked up again at the stars through the dome. They blinked faintly like they were listening. Days passed and the challenges grew harder. In the Void Tactics class, cadets learned to navigate through dark matter storms using their energy senses. Elias could not sense energy like them, so he had to rely on instinct and observation. When the test began, most cadets used their powers to see through the darkness. Lyra glided easily through the glowing paths. But halfway through, the simulator glitched. The lights vanished completely. Even energy senses failed. The hall went black. Voices filled with panic. "I can't see the markers." "The path's gone." Elias closed his eyes and listened. He could hear the faint hum of the engine simulation, the soft wind of the digital current. Slowly, he mapped the sounds in his mind. Then he moved. Step by step, he found the pattern, the hidden rhythm of the storm. When the lights returned, Elias stood at the center beacon, the only one who had finished. The instructor stared. "How did you do that without energy?" Elias wiped sweat from his face. "Sometimes light blinds us. Darkness teaches us to listen." Lyra said nothing, but her usual laughter didn't come that day. Weeks turned into months. The cadets traveled for their first space mission, a field trip to the asteroid colonies. The ship Starwind glided through the void, bright and proud. Lyra stood at the bridge watching the stars pass. Elias worked silently near the navigation deck, checking data lines and maps. When a meteor cluster appeared ahead, the commander ordered a course correction. But the sensors glitched again. The navigation drones failed to respond. Panic spread. "The system's blind," someone shouted. Without thinking, Elias ran to the manual controls. "I can plot it by eye." The officer hesitated. "You can't," but Elias was already at the console. His fingers flew across the controls. He read the rotation angles, the light curves, the speed of the asteroids. His mind worked like an old navigator's, seeing patterns where machines saw chaos. The ship tilted sharply, dodging the falling rocks. A moment later, silence. They had passed through safely. The crew looked at him in shock. Lyra approached slowly. "How did you see all that without sensors?" Elias looked at the glowing space ahead. "Humans used to sail by the stars," he said quietly. "Maybe some memories never fade." That night, when everyone slept, Elias stood on the outer deck. The ship drifted through the empty sea of stars. He gazed at the sky and whispered, "We are not forgotten. Not yet." And somewhere in the distance, a faint light flickered, a star pulsing once, then twice. Lyra, passing by quietly, saw him looking at the stars. For a moment, she felt something strange. The stars seemed to shimmer differently around him, as if listening. She didn't understand it then, but that night was the beginning of something the galaxy hadn't seen in 1,000 years. The stars were starting to remember his name. The next morning, the Starwind floated in orbit above the asteroid colony. The cadets were still talking about what had happened the day before. No one could believe that a human, someone without energy control, without advanced senses, had saved them from a deadly meteor storm. Some called it luck. Others said it was a miracle. But deep down, everyone knew what they had seen. The way Elias had read the movement of the stars. The way he had guided the ship. It was something no one had ever done without technology. Even the instructors were silent around him. Lyra Valen, who had once laughed the loudest, found herself watching him now with quiet eyes. Something about Elias unsettled her. Not fear, but curiosity. His calm face, his patient nature, his quiet strength. It was unlike anything she had seen before. The cadets began their training mission on the asteroid colony. It was a harsh, dusty world covered in gray stone and metal domes. They were to study the colony's mining systems and learn about field repairs under real conditions. Lyra worked with her usual team, commanding the drones and organizing reports. Elias was assigned to check the power grid near the mining tunnels. While others complained about the dirt and noise, Elias didn't mind. He liked the silence. It reminded him of home, the quiet deserts of the hidden Earth colony where stars were bright and nights were long. As he repaired the circuits, he noticed a strange vibration under the ground. The instruments showed no problem, but he could feel a faint hum like a heartbeat deep below the rocks. He placed his hand on the ground and closed his eyes. The hum grew stronger. It was not mechanical. It was alive. At the same time, Lyra was in the command center. The colony's supervisor, an old Arethian engineer named Carol, looked worried. "The energy readings are strange," he said. "Something under the surface is awakening." Lyra frowned. "Awakening? You mean machinery?" Carl shook his head. "No, the scanners can't define it. It's not built by us." Suddenly, alarms blared through the base. "Energy surge detected below the main tunnels." The ground shook violently. Dust filled the air. Lights flickered. Cadets screamed as the floor split apart. Lyra ran for the exit, shouting orders. "Evacuate the lower levels. Get everyone out now!" But deep below, Elias was still in the tunnels. The ceiling cracked above him and stones rained down. He tried to run, but the vibration stopped him. It was calling him. The hum turned into a sound, a soft whisper inside his mind. Elias Kane. He froze, his heart raced. "Who's there?" He whispered aloud, "Child of Earth. The stars remember." A blinding light burst from the ground. The dust cleared and Elias saw it. A huge metallic structure buried under the stone, shaped like a star, glowing with lines of ancient symbols. It pulsed once, twice, as if breathing. He stepped closer. His hand reached out and the light grew brighter. Above the surface, Lyra had returned with a rescue team. "Where is he?" she shouted. "He's still down there," a cadet answered. Ignoring the others, Lyra ran straight into the tunnel. The air was hot, glowing red from the cracks. When she reached the lower chamber, she stopped in shock. Elias stood in front of the glowing structure. The light surrounded him like a living wave. His eyes reflected the shine, calm but distant, as if he was listening to something far away. "Elias," Lyra cried. "Get away from that thing." He didn't move. The light curved toward him, wrapping around his body without burning him. The strange symbols rose into the air, floating around them both. Lyra covered her eyes, but she could still see shapes forming in the glow, old star maps, constellations, and fragments of human words. When the light finally faded, Elias fell to his knees. The structure stopped glowing and went silent again. Lyra ran to him. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but I saw something." "What did you see?" He looked at her, his voice low and steady. "Memories, not mine. The stars showed me. Ships, cities in the void, humans standing among the stars. They called it the first choir." Lyra frowned. "The first choir? That's a myth. No one knows if humans ever controlled the stars." Elias stood, dust falling from his uniform. "It wasn't a myth, Lyra. I saw it. The stars were alive. They listened to our kind once. The command center was in chaos when they returned. The instructors questioned them both, but Elias told only part of the truth. He said the structure was some kind of old human relic, maybe an energy generator. He didn't mention the voice. Later, when everyone had gone to rest, Lyra found him sitting outside the colony dome, staring at the sky again. "You didn't tell them everything," she said softly. He didn't turn. "Would they believe me if I did?" She sat beside him, her silver armor reflecting the starlight. "Probably not," she admitted. "Even I don't understand what happened down there." Elias smiled faintly. "Neither do I." There was a long silence between them. The stars above shimmered quietly. Then Lyra asked, "When the light surrounded you, I felt something. Like warmth, but also sadness. It felt old." Elias nodded slowly. "The stars mourned us. They remember what we lost. What did we lose?" she asked. "Our place," he said simply. "Once humans didn't just travel through space. We spoke to it. We sang with the stars. But when pride grew, we fell. The stars went silent." Lyra looked at him, her proud voice quieter now. "Maybe the stars are speaking again." Elias turned his gaze upward. "Maybe, but they don't call to me for power or glory. They call for remembrance." The next day, the Academy recalled all cadets from the asteroid mission. The mysterious structure was sealed, and researchers from the Celestial Fleet were sent to study it. But the strange energy pattern that had awakened was spreading. Across the nearby systems, stars began to flicker, slowly at first, then in perfect rhythm as if responding to a silent song. Lyra watched the news in disbelief. Every outer star blinking at once? "That's impossible." Elias stood beside her. "Not impossible," he said quietly. "They're calling. Calling for what?" for someone to listen. When the Star Wind returned to the academy, things were different. The instructors looked at Elias with new eyes. Some feared him. Some respected him. The other cadets whispered in the halls, but this time it wasn't laughter. It was wonder. Even Lyra found herself defending him when others spoke cruelly. One evening, she saw him in the simulator again, training alone. The practice drones moved fast, but he was faster. His rod struck with precision, his body moving like a rhythm learned from long ago. When he finished, sweat ran down his face, but his eyes were calm. "You never stop training," she said, stepping closer. He smiled slightly. "Humans are fragile," he replied. "We survive by being ready." Lyra hesitated. "Elias, when I first met you, I thought you were weak, but now, I'm not sure what you are." He looked at her kindly. "I'm still human, just a small voice in a very large sky." She met his gaze and said quietly, "Then maybe it's time the sky listens again." That night, something extraordinary happened. As the academy slept, every star visible through the dome flickered once, twice, then shone in perfect alignment, forming a single pattern in the sky. The academy systems went wild, alarms flashing everywhere. The pattern was unmistakable, lines and curves forming one name: Elias Kane. Lyra rushed to the observation deck, her heart racing. Elias was already there, standing beneath the glowing pattern. The starlight touched his face softly. "They're answering," he whispered. Lyra stepped closer, her voice trembling. "The stars themselves are calling your name." Elias looked at her, his expression both amazed and sad. "No, they're not calling me. They're remembering humanity." The stars pulsed once more, brighter than before. Across the galaxy, ancient systems awakened, forgotten satellites, sleeping archives, old human beacons that hadn't lit up in centuries. The stars had begun to speak again, and the galaxy, for the first time in 1,000 years, remembered what it meant to hear the name of a human. The academy was no longer quiet. Every corridor buzzed with rumors. Every screen flashed with the same message. Unexplained stellar activity, signal pattern identified, human language. For centuries, humans had been only a story, a small, vanished species that once reached the stars and then disappeared. Now the stars themselves were speaking in their name. The galaxy trembled with curiosity and fear. In the middle of that storm stood Elias Kane, the human who had once been ignored and laughed at. Now people stared when he walked through the halls. Some bowed their heads slightly in respect. Others moved away, whispering, but Elias didn't seek attention. He kept to himself, calm and quiet, even as his name spread across worlds. Lyra Valen watched all of it happen. She had once mocked him. Now she stood beside him, unsure how to face the truth. The more she saw him, the more she realized something deep. He never tried to prove his greatness. He only listened to the stars. A meeting was called in the Academy's grand chamber. The instructors, officers, and high-ranking fleet members arrived. Lyra sat among the cadets while Elias stood before the council. At the center of the hall, a large projection flickered, thousands of stars blinking in rhythm, forming a wave pattern. An officer spoke, his voice serious. "Every major system within this quadrant shows the same phenomenon. The light patterns form human symbols, ancient Earth characters. They spell the name Elias Kane. We need an explanation." Elias looked up at the projection. His expression stayed calm. "I didn't cause this," he said. "But maybe I answered it." A murmur ran through the room. The fleet admiral leaned forward. "Explain." Elias took a breath. "The stars are alive in a way we don't understand. Long ago, humans built something, machines or voices, meant to connect with the stars. They called it the choir. I think what happened on the asteroid woke them up." The admiral frowned. "You're suggesting that the stars remember your people?" Elias nodded slowly. "Yes, they remember humanity's promise and our fall." Silence filled the chamber. The officers exchanged uncertain looks. Some laughed nervously, but others looked thoughtful. Lyra could see the doubt and fear on their faces. The admiral finally said, "Until we understand what this means, Cadet Kane, you are to remain under observation. You will continue your training, but you will not leave the academy grounds." Elias simply bowed his head. "Understood, sir." That night, Lyra found him sitting again under the glass dome looking at the stars. The starlight painted silver lines across his face. "They're afraid of you," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but I'm not the danger they think." Then what is the danger? He turned his gaze to the endless night, forgetting. The galaxy has forgotten what humans stood for. We built peace, then we lost it. The stars are reminding everyone that memory still lives. Lyra sat beside him. The silence between them was gentle, not awkward. For the first time, she didn't see him as strange or weak. She saw him as something else, something steady. You speak as if you've known the stars your whole life, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Maybe they were always waiting for someone to listen again. The next few days brought chaos. Reports came in from far sectors, ancient satellites awakening, sending unknown data streams. Some worlds thought it was a warning. Others believed it was hope. On one distant moon, an old human structure was found, a ruined station half buried in ice. Its walls glowed faintly when scientists approached. The symbol on its gate matched the pattern of Elias's name in the stars. When the message reached the academy, the instructors couldn't ignore it anymore. A small team of cadets was chosen to visit the site. Among them were Elias and Lyra. The journey to the frozen moon was long. Their ship, the Aurora's Light, glided through cold darkness, its hull shining faintly against the void. Lyra sat in the cockpit, watching Elias as he studied the star maps. You really think this station is connected to your people? She asked. Elias nodded. I think it's more than that. I think it's waiting. Waiting for what? For us. When they landed, the air was thin and sharp. The landscape was endless white, ice stretching in every direction. The old structure rose from the snow like a mountain of silver stone. Symbols glowed faintly across its surface, matching those from the asteroid chamber. As they entered, the air grew warmer. Faint lights followed their steps, awakening after centuries of sleep. Dust floated like snowflakes in the dim hall. In the central chamber, a tall crystal stood surrounded by metal rings. Strange energy lines pulsed through the floor. Lyra touched one of the symbols. It's human design. But this technology is far beyond what we have today. Elias stepped closer. The crystal began to glow brighter. The rings moved slowly, as if recognizing him. A deep hum filled the room. Then a voice, soft and ancient, echoed in the air. Elias Kane, last of Earth's line. The choir remembers, the cadets gasped. Lyra's eyes widened. Elias took a slow breath. Who are you? We are the Watchers. We hold the memory of humankind. The stars have slept for long ages, but your presence has awakened the signal. Why me? Because you carry the same pattern as the first singers. Your mind still remembers their song. Elias felt a pulse of light spread from the crystal, passing through him like a wave of warmth. The symbols on the walls came alive, showing images, humans walking among stars, ships powered by light, worlds filled with music and peace. Then the light faded, leaving silence once more. Outside the chamber, the team gathered in awe. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. Elias, you saw it again, didn't you? He nodded. Yes. The stars showed me our beginning and warned me of our end. What do you mean? They said the choir was built to protect life across the galaxy. But when humans fell, the choir went silent. Now something is stirring that could destroy it all again. Lyra frowned. Something? Something older than any of us, he said quietly. The stars are afraid. When they returned to the ship, the fleet demanded a report. The officers dismissed much of it as an illusion or malfunction. But strange things continued to happen. Ships across the nearby system started losing power briefly, as if something was drawing energy from the stars themselves. The scientists couldn't explain it, but Elias knew. The choir was waking up and it was reaching out. Late that night, he stood on the observation deck once more. The stars were brighter than before, pulsing in a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Lyra joined him quietly. You think the choir is calling you again? He nodded. Not just me. It's calling all of us, every living being who has forgotten what the stars once meant. Lyra's voice softened. What do they mean? He turned toward her, eyes full of calm light. Hope. The next day, the Academy received a new order from the Galactic Council. All research regarding the human signals is now classified. Cadet Elias Kane is to be escorted to the capital for further study. The instructors told him gently, but he understood what it really meant. They wanted to control him, or maybe hide him. When the guards arrived, Lyra stood in front of them. He's not a weapon, she said fiercely. He saved lives. You can't just lock him away. But Elias touched her shoulder lightly. It's all right. Let them take me. Sometimes truth needs to travel into darkness before it finds light again. Lyra's eyes shone with worry. Will I see you again? He smiled faintly. If the stars remember me, then yes. As the ship rose, Lyra looked up at the sky. The stars above the academy flickered again, slowly, in rhythm. She realized then that the stars weren't just answering Elias. They were watching her too, and everyone who still carried the spark of belief. For the first time in her life, Lyra Valen whispered a human name not in mockery, but in awe, Elias Kane, and somewhere in the deep, endless night the stars whispered back. The ship carrying Elias Kane cut silently through the void, gliding past nebulae and silent star clusters. The cadets who had accompanied him to the frozen moon were left behind, but Lyra Valen had secretly secured a seat for herself. She had refused to let him face the Galactic Council alone. Inside the capital's orbiting station, towering above a sea of bustling starports, the atmosphere was different. Everything gleamed, polished metal, bright lights, and layers of authority. Ships of every shape and size moved in perfect rhythm, obeying unseen laws of gravity and commerce. For Elias, it was overwhelming. He had traveled to many worlds, but nothing compared to the scale of the capital. From the observation deck, he could see millions of lights flickering like stars brought close. Lyra stood beside him, quiet as he took it all in. You're not used to this kind of order, she said softly. I never imagined humans would once live among such worlds, Elias replied. And yet, the stars still remember. When they disembarked, the council's agents were already waiting. Tall figures in ceremonial robes led them through the station's halls. The air hummed with quiet energy, and every door and panel seemed alive with technology far older and more complex than anything Elias had seen. The council chamber itself was massive. Transparent walls showed the spinning galaxy outside. At its center, the council members sat in semicircles, their robes reflecting starlight. Each member represented a major species across the quadrant, their faces serious and unreadable. Cadet Kane, the head of the council, began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Your arrival has caused unprecedented events. Stars across the galaxy are responding in patterns previously unseen. Explain yourself. Elias bowed his head. I did not cause it. I only listened. Listened? The head asked sharply. The stars answer your presence alone. You are a human. Your species is considered extinct. How can you hold such influence over celestial signals? Elias hesitated, then said, Humans once built a connection with the stars. They were alive to us and we were alive to them. I did not command them. I merely answered. The stars remembered my kind and their signal awoke. A murmur spread through the chamber. Several council members exchanged glances. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered quietly. Proof, demanded a silver-scaled diplomat from the Erythian sector. You claim the stars are conscious. Prove it. Elias looked up through the transparent ceiling. Above them, the galaxy shimmered. Slowly, stars in the sectors surrounding the capital began to pulse in a steady rhythm. Lines of light formed symbols, ancient human runes spelling his name. The chamber fell silent. Even the most skeptical members could not deny what they saw. Lyra's hand brushed his arm. You did it again, she whispered. No, he said quietly. They are calling. I am only listening. The council's curiosity shifted into caution. They summoned Elias to a high-security laboratory, a place filled with machines capable of scanning, measuring, and decoding any signal. Scientists and engineers from across the galaxy crowded around him, observing as he stood calmly before them. Energy readings are impossible, one said. No human should interact with the stars this way, yet the patterns confirm it. Elias closed his eyes and felt the pulse beneath his skin, the faint hum in his mind. It was subtle at first, like a heartbeat, then growing stronger, stretching outward into the cosmos. Symbols appeared in the air, glowing faintly. Your mind aligns with the choir, said a human historian, her voice trembling. We thought it was myth. We thought it was gone, and yet, here it is. What is the choir? Asked a council member sharply. Elias opened his eyes. The choir is the memory of humanity, the songs of stars we built long ago. They guided us, protected life, and carried knowledge across the galaxy. When humans fell, it went silent. Now, it awakens again. The room fell silent. Machines whirred as sensors detected energy streams bending toward Elias. The air around him felt alive, vibrating with unseen currents. Days passed as the Council studied him. They tried simulations, energy tests, and containment fields, but nothing could fully measure Elias's connection to the choir. Every time they tried to control him, the stars themselves pushed back, pulsing signals that disrupted the instruments. It became clear, Elias could not be contained. Lyra watched him during the tests. Each time the lights bent toward him, each time ancient symbols shimmered in the air. She realized that humanity was not just a species of flesh and bone. Humanity was a spark, a rhythm of life that could still influence the galaxy. Elias, despite the Council's constant observation, remained calm. He studied their instruments, asked questions about the choir's origin, and slowly began understanding what they had built centuries ago. One evening, he approached Lyra quietly. "The choir. It is waking, but it is not fully ready. Something is missing." "What do you mean?" she asked. "Memory," he said. "Humans once knew the stars, the planets, and life itself, but that knowledge was lost. To restore the choir, we must remember, not just our songs, but our promise. That is why the stars are responding to me first. I am the last who can hear them clearly." Lyra nodded slowly, the enormity of his words sinking in. "And what does the Council want from you?" "Control," he said simply. "They see it as power. But the choir is not a weapon. It is a voice, a memory." The Council, however, had already begun to fear him. They called an emergency session. Aliens and humans alike gathered to decide his fate. "Cadet Kane is unpredictable," said one voice. "If the choir grows in strength, it could overwhelm our systems. We cannot risk letting him roam free. Containment may not work," said another. "Even our strongest shields cannot block the choir's signal if he chooses to channel it." Elias stood quietly listening. He had expected this. The galaxy was not ready to remember humanity fully, not yet. Lyra stepped forward, her voice firm. "You are not a threat. He has already saved lives, and he has shown restraint. What he is doing is a gift, not a weapon." The Council debated long into the night. Some demanded confinement. Others suggested observation. Finally, they reached a compromise. Elias would remain under supervision, but the choir's awakening would continue, with the Council monitoring the effects. Alone in his quarters that night, Elias looked out at the stars. They pulsed softly, like distant hearts beating in unison. He could sense the choir stretching outward, touching planets, satellites, and long-forgotten relics. He closed his eyes and felt a voice, ancient and soft. "Child of Earth, the memory must be restored. The song must continue." He opened his eyes, breathing deeply. The weight of the galaxy pressed on him, but he did not falter. Lyra entered quietly. "You could have tried to fight them," she said softly. "But you didn't," Elias shook his head. "They cannot understand yet. The stars must teach them. Humanity must remind them." "And what about you?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I cannot do it alone. You have already begun to listen." Lyra felt her heart stir. She realized that it was no longer just his story. It was theirs, the stars, the choir, and the memory of a species that refused to be forgotten. In the following days, Elias began to explore the ancient knowledge of the choir. In hidden archives beneath the capital, he discovered star maps, charts, and fragments of old songs written in long-lost human languages. He traced patterns of star routes, ancient communications, and methods to awaken dormant energy nodes across the galaxy. Every discovery brought new understanding and new questions. One night, the stars pulsed brighter than ever. Elias and Lyra watched from the observation deck as lines of light formed across sectors, linking distant systems. "The choir is learning to speak again," Elias said quietly. "It's remembering the paths, the songs, and the promise humans once made." Lyra's eyes shone with awe. "And it started with you," he shook his head. "No, it started with them, the stars. I only chose to listen." The galaxy waited silently, unaware that history was being rewritten. A species long thought extinct was stirring, not in flesh and blood alone, but in memory and song. And somewhere deep in the void, the choir whispered, "Remember, and rise again." The capital's orbiting station trembled under a quiet energy. Across the galaxy, stars pulsed in rhythm, sending waves of light that stretched across sectors. Ships in distant systems reported sudden bursts of energy, signals too complex to be artificial, too orderly to be random. At the center of it all stood Elias Kane, calm and steady, his gray eyes reflecting the flickering stars outside the observation deck. The choir, the memory and song of humanity, was awakening. Beside him, Lyra Valen watched silently. The woman who had once laughed at his origins now understood something larger than both of them. The stars themselves were alive in ways the galaxy had forgotten, and Elias was their listener. "They're stronger than before," Elias whispered. "I can feel the nodes waking across the void. Every beacon, every relic is calling," Lyra nodded. "And the council?" "They are watching," he said. "Some fear us, others are curious. But the stars don't care about fear or politics. They care about memory, promise, and action." The awakening began quietly. Small signals appeared in isolated systems. Ancient satellites, long dead, blinked back to life. Relics from forgotten human colonies activated, sending streams of energy into space. Slowly, these signals converged, forming a pattern across the stars, a network that spanned sectors. Elias stepped to the center of the observation deck and raised his arms. Light bent around him, responding to the choir. The symbols that had once spelled his name now extended outward, forming waves across the galaxy, reaching planets and ships alike. The crew and council members watched in awe and fear. Machines recorded impossible data. Instruments failed to measure the energy's full scope, and yet Elias remained calm. "This is not destruction," he said softly. "It is memory. The stars are remembering humanity as they once did." In the council chambers, debates raged. Some members feared the power, calling it dangerous. "It could destabilize entire sectors," one argued, but others saw hope. "If this signal is controlled, it could restore lost knowledge, unite civilizations, and preserve life in ways we cannot imagine," said another. Lyra entered the chamber, her voice steady. "It is already controlled." Elias only listens. "The choir is alive, yes, but it is not a weapon. It is a song, and songs cannot harm those who open their hearts to them." The council paused. Few had seen courage so simple and clear. Even the most cautious delegates could not deny the truth in her words. Outside, the stars pulsed brighter than ever. Planets lit with soft colors, auroras flaring across atmospheres in rhythm with the choir. Ships reported strange experiences, visions of ancient civilizations, whispers of knowledge long lost, memories of humans guiding their ancestors across the stars. Elias walked through the observation deck, feeling the choir flow through him like water. Every pulse of light, every vibration was a message, a story, a memory. He could hear the ships of the first choir, their creators long gone, singing across the void. And then he felt something new. A presence, a consciousness older than anything in the galaxy. It was neither hostile nor friendly, simply observing. "The song grows," the voice whispered, ancient and soft. "You carry it well, child of Earth," Elias bowed slightly. "I am only a listener. The stars are the singers. Then continue to hear and let them remember." The awakening spread to distant worlds. In one sector, humans long forgotten on isolated colonies felt a strange warmth, a memory stirring in their blood. They woke to visions of ships, cities in space, and songs their ancestors once sang. Across other planets, alien civilizations reported inexplicable clarity, the sense of guidance, harmony, and connection to the galaxy itself. The choir's song was not limited to humans. Its memory touched all life, reminding species of shared history and cosmic responsibility. It healed rifts, resolved disputes, and even prevented skirmishes between fleets. Lyra stood beside Elias, watching the spectacle. "Do you see it?" she whispered. "The galaxy. It remembers humanity, but not just humans. Everything benefits from it," Elias nodded. "That was always the promise of the choir, not domination, not power, memory, guidance, harmony." The council, now observing directly through holoscreens, realized the truth. Elias was not a threat. He was a bridge. The galaxy had forgotten its past, but through him it could remember. One council member asked cautiously, "Cadet Kane, what happens now? Can this continue?" Elias turned toward the holographic stars. "Yes, but only if the galaxy chooses to listen. The choir can awaken knowledge, teach lessons, and remind civilizations of their past, but it cannot force understanding. Memory is a gift, not a chain. A long silence followed. The members of the council looked at one another, then back at Elias. Slowly, heads nodded, but not everyone welcomed the awakening. Some feared the choir, thinking it a power beyond their control. Secret factions in distant systems began plotting to intercept the signals, believing that if they controlled Elias, they could control the stars. Elias felt the first ripple of danger. He spoke to Lyra quietly. "The stars trust me, but not everyone will. Some will try to stop us." She looked worried. "Then we must be careful. The choir is strong, but it cannot fight anger or fear." "I know," he replied. "We will let the stars lead, and we will act only when necessary." Days later, the choir reached its first true awakening. In the central system of the outer galaxy, the stars formed a perfect web of light pulsing in unison. It created a visible bridge between planets, connecting ancient human colonies, hidden energy nodes, and scattered civilizations. Elias stood at the observation deck, feeling the choir hum through him. He raised his arms, and the symbols of humanity's memory glowed brightly in response. The pulse reached every system in the sector, and the message was clear. Humans were here once, and their legacy mattered. Lyra watched the light touch the stars. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "And powerful." Elias turned to her, a faint smile on his face. "It is not mine." "It belongs to everyone who remembers, or who chooses to remember." The awakening was complete but subtle. No weapon had fired, no empire had fallen. Instead, the galaxy had remembered the value of hope, the strength of knowledge, and the promise of unity. In that moment, the stars themselves shone brighter than ever before. Beacons of energy hummed across every sector, whispering the name of the last human capable of listening, Elias Kane. And though the galaxy knew his name, Elias did not see himself as a hero. He was only a human who had chosen to listen. Months later, peace settled over the capital. The council revised its policies, allowing open study of the choir. Scientists and cadets worked together to preserve the newly awakened knowledge. The galaxy had changed, subtly but profoundly. Lyra stood beside Elias one last time before he returned to the observation deck for a solitary vigil. "The stars have remembered," she said. "You did it," Elias shook his head. "No, they did it. I only listened. Humanity only needed someone willing to hear." She smiled, a mixture of awe and admiration. "Then what happens next?" Elias looked toward the endless sky, every star a glowing memory. "Next, the galaxy remembers itself, and humanity's song lives again." At that moment, the choir pulsed once more, a soft, harmonious note that resonated through space. Across the galaxy, planets brightened, old colonies revived, and lost knowledge flowed like rivers of light. The song of humanity had returned, not in armies, not in conquest, but in memory, wisdom, and hope. Lyra watched the lights pulse and whispered softly, "I understand now. You were never ordinary. You were the listener the stars waited for." Elias smiled faintly, looking at the rhythm of lights above. "No one listens forever, but sometimes listening is enough to change everything." And somewhere deep in the heart of the cosmos, the stars responded once more, brighter than ever, singing the legacy of humanity across the universe.